Welcome GCSE students. What I'm going to do here is go through the language and the form and structure for Kamikaze, assuming that you've already looked into the context of the poem, and there are plenty of resources available on OneNote and elsewhere for you to do that. So one of the first things I've noticed about this poem is that people can sometimes become confused about who is who, and it's important, I think, that we've got some kind of idea of a family tree and who is speaking and who the people that she is speaking about are. So I'm just going to start off very quickly down here with a little diagram, hopefully, just to make it clear exactly who is who, because we've got a kind of family tree in this poem. In fact, I think I'm just going to write that up here actually. So family tree, and underline that. We have 4 generations, so 4 generations that included in this poem. At the top we have a grandfather, and he is a fisherman, and he is the grandfather to the daughter. That will become clear later on. I forgot how to spell daughter for a moment there. And he is a fisherman. There's a little picture of a boat just to exemplify that. And moving down from his part in the family tree, we have here we've got the Kamikaze pilot. So I'll draw a quick picture of a Kamikaze plane, and there it is flying along, and we have the pilot, and we also have several of the pilot's brothers. Let's just do a couple of pictures, just rubbishy pictures, but at least they are helping you understand that we've got a grandfather above, we've got his son and other sons beneath that, and actually the pilot himself had a family, and one of those is the daughter. And actually let's write here, because it's important that the poem is her story. The poem is her story, and that the daughter herself had some children, and so these are unnamed. All people in the poem are unnamed. However, I think what's important for you to know is that this is the key point, that the daughter's story is the one that we get in the poem, and she refers to her father, a kamikaze pilot, who himself in his memories refers to his father, and occasionally we hear the daughter refer directly or speak directly to her children in the poem. So we've got a little family tree here. Hopefully that will help you understand. So I'm going to come up to well, we begin I guess with the title of the poem, Kamikaze, which in Japanese, it is a Japanese word, and it translates, let me just move this for you, as divine wind. So it's interesting that you've got 2 different elements to this, that something divine is considered holy or at least pleasing, and wind is, I guess it's a natural force, isn't it? So kamikaze pilots, by their definition, by their title, are something that is both holy and pleasing and natural force. This makes it a very positive thing to be, and so therefore in the Japanese language there's no sort of real reason why you wouldn't want to be holy and pleasing and represent a national force. So this is just hopefully getting the meaning demystified for you. So her father embarked at sunrise with a flask of water, a samurai sword in the cockpit, shaven head full of powerful incantations, and enough fuel for a one-way journey into history. So much of this stanza emphasizes the brainwashing and conditioning of kamikaze pilots in general, and of course of the father that we're talking about. Let's just look at some of these elements. So this, the father embarked. I mean, this is an interesting verb in itself, because it makes you think that this pilot's journey is some kind of quest or voyage of great significance. It's not he just got into a plane to go and kill himself. This is embarking on some kind of greater journey. So I'm just going to write that up here, really, that embarked is an interesting verb choice. I need to say why. That it implies the pilot's that implies that the pilot's journey is a quest or a voyage of great significance. So, you know, this embarkation is not somebody just getting into a plane. That straight away demonstrates how we've got some kind of brainwashing, because, you know, you're not embarking on a voyage or a quest. You're going to kill yourself. And sunrise, you know, this represents, I think, a time of hope. It's a new dawn. Sunrises are the time when the whole day is ahead of you. So this represents a new dawn, or time of hope. So, you know, these are all sort of positives to come from this terrible journey that the pilot is about to go on. Anyway, what's he got? He's got a flask of water. He's got a samurai sword. And interesting that he's got a samurai sword. If you're going to fly your plane into an American warship, you really do not need to take with you a samurai sword. However, samurai swords, that's right, that there's needless to take. Samurai swords, there's a little arrow there. Samurai swords, needless to take. So excuse my writing, it's very cold in here. Needless to take, but significantly, these swords, according to the Bushido code, an ancient Japanese ritual which was resurrected for the Second World War, these swords embody the soul. In fact, why don't I just actually make sure that I've got the idea of it being embodied in the sword by just drawing a picture of the samurai sword, and that's where the soul is. So we have a very literal definition there of why he is taking it. Also in the cockpit, he's got his samurai sword. He also has a shaven head. Let's just come over here. So let's just draw a picture of a shaven head, and for some reason, because he's a kamikaze pilot, I feel the need to draw that rising sun. I instinctively want to put hair in. However, the significant thing is that a shaven head actually helps depersonalize people. A shaven head helps remove personal identity. So any part of the pilot that might want to question the mission will have been suppressed by the kind of group mentality of everybody having shaved heads, everybody going through these rituals together, helps remove personal identity. And I guess it just turns the pilot and others like him into a national weapon. That actually this is the pilot's function. It really is just to be some kind of guidance system for a new and horrific weapon. And he's going to take a one-way journey into history. This again makes it sound very grand, very noble. But actually, this is a man who is going to kill himself in his plane. This is toning down speech. This is a euphemism. So this euphemism, making the pilot's intended. Let's write that down. Making the pilot's intended sacrifice. Scribble it out. It's cold hands again. Sacrifice and death. So this is a euphemism, making the pilot's intended sacrifice and death seem more noble and heroic. Than what it actually is. So I've got this euphemism here. All of these things I've annotated all represent a kind of brainwashing. In fact, actually, when we look at the shaven head, what is the shaven head full of? Well, it's full of powerful incantations. That is like ceremonial kind of spells almost. That too, actually, is quite literally brainwashing. What is his head full of? It has his brain in it, but his own personal identity has been taken away and removed and replaced with powerful incantations. This, I think, emphasizes the degree to which excuse me, national identity defeats or overcomes personal identity. So everything we have annotated here is about conditioning. Condition your pilots so that they will die for you and fly themselves into an American warship. Anyway, the speaker says, but halfway there, she thought, recounting it later to her children, he must have looked far down at a little fishing boat strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea. This first word of this stanza is probably the first hint that he is going to challenge his orders, that this conjunction but, and often these stanzas begin with buts and ands, I guess representing a sense of fate, but this conjunction but indicates the pilot's first questioning of his orders. Okay, so he must have looked far down. It's it's important actually to remember that this is a woman, a daughter of this pilot, who is actually trying to imagine what it must have been like for him. So it's not a direct memory of his or anything like that. She is imagining these things throughout. It's important that. Halfway she thought, recounting it later to her children, he must have looked down at a little fishing boat strung out like bunting. And that's an interesting simile there, strung out like bunting. We will be looking at that. I think I'll do that with a picture. In fact, let's just think of the pilot overhead. Let's just draw a picture again of the pilot's plane. There he goes. That is the pilot, and he is looking far down. That's not him dropping any bombs or anything like that. This is, let me make it clear, the pilot looking far down, and you can see the little fishing boats strung out like bunting. So let's just draw some bunting here. Bunting like those little celebratory flags that are on a string, and these actually are boats that to him seem like they are bunting. In fact, to make sure that this is at sea, let's just draw the horizon line. And so this simile, strung out like bunting, it kind of forces the reader to reimagine the boats as something of a national symbol, like bunting. And so they themselves, the boats and the fishing industry, central to Japan's culture, I think, are something worth living for, something that he notices on his way to change his mind. Let's try and put that down over here. So the simile, strung out like bunting, forces readers to reimagine the boats in terms of bunting, which represents his important part, which represents national pride. And celebration. And so, you know, this is somebody who's flying on their way to death, and you look down and you see something that actually represents national pride in a different way to what I am representing it with. He is believing, or he is being conditioned to believe, that national pride is about flying your plane into a ship. But now he's seeing another alternative symbol of national pride, demonstrated with the metaphor, the simile, bunting here. And it's given, I guess, an alternative thought for national pride, something that could be chosen instead of flying my plane into boats. And he sees it on a green-blue translucent sea. And beneath them, that's beneath the boats, yeah, beneath them, arcing in swathes like a huge flag waved first one way, then the other, in a figure of eight, the dark shoals of fishes, flashing silver as their bellies swiveled towards the sun. So he saw beneath, I'm going to just continue his vision, he saw beneath the boats, he saw dark shoals of fishes. These are fishes. Let's just make sure that these are something, they're not very recognizable as fish, I don't think, but never mind. I'll do one big puff of fish. Okay, so these are fish. And he can see those fish, interestingly, as using the simile, look, like a huge flag, wave first one way, then the other. And beneath them, arcing in swaves like a huge flag, waved first one way, then the other, in a figure of 8, the dark shoals of fishes. So you need to think of how he saw these fish. He saw these fish like, that is a simile, like a huge flag. Another symbol of national pride, you might suggest. And this flag is being waved first one way, then the other, in a figure of 8. That is definitely getting his attention. So I'll just do a little figure of 8 here. This is the way in which it was waved. And this simile, let's write that over here. So the simile, like a huge flag. Let's think about what the simile does. Is that forces readers to reimagine the fish, the dark shoals of the fish, in terms of a national emblem, that is a flag. And it's actually, when you think about it, the way it's being waved, it is alerting the pilot of something else representing national pride. That is fish, which is central to Japanese culture. And so really both of these similes here, the boats themselves, which are strung out like bunting, and the fish that are like a huge flag, waved first one way then the other, both of them offer an alternative to a suicide mission, that they both offer a different way to look at national pride. So I'm going to write in a little box between these, actually, maybe I can fit it in, that this is a clear alternative to suicide mission. And I'll just put a little box down there, just to demonstrate really that both of these images create a different way to look at the suicide mission that he's on, and make him think of national pride as something to do with boats and fishing and the beauty of the sea and so on. So we come to this stanza here, where actually when you think about this stanza, there are lots of words in this stanza that can demonstrate turning around when you think about it. On a green-blue translucency, and beneath them arcing in swathes like a huge flag waved first one way then the other. This is all about turning around, arcing first one way then the other. A figure of 8 turns one way then the other. The dark shoals of fishes flashing silver as their bellies swiveled towards the sun. And so, you know, I think this is significant, this semantic field. I'm just going to see if I can unite all those arrows in the same direction here. That there surely is the semantic field of turning here. And this, I think, at the very least, hinting at the pilot's eventual change of heart, that he himself ends up turning around. And it's interesting that when you look at the direction, the first one way then the other in a figure of 8, the dark shoals of fishes flashing silver as their bellies swiveled towards the sun. So, you know, this national emblem, because we're looking at that through a simile, is actually going towards or swiveling towards the sun. And as we know, the sun, let's just draw a quick Japanese flag to demonstrate it. That the sun is a national symbol of Japan, and it seems to be the place to turn towards. Or swivel towards, or arc towards. So that could be the ultimate destination. You're a pilot, you're halfway out, and you've seen these boats, you've seen these fishes, and everything seems to be going back towards the sun. And that is turning around back towards Japan, if you could think of the sun representing Japan, because it does. And then the pilot goes into these remembrances of somehow when he was younger. Let's just draw a picture of that same pilot with the same Karate Kid bandana on, and this time he is in the cockpit of his plane. So there he is flying in his plane, his wings. And he remembers, I'm putting like a little cartoon-like remembrance bubble, if you like, around here. And he remembers how he and his brothers, waiting on the shore, built cairns of pearl grey pebbles to see whose withstood the longest the turbulent inrush of breakers, bringing their father's boat safe. And when you think about cairns, I don't know if you know what a cairn is. If you ever go walking in the hills and you are unlucky enough to have your footpath snowed under so you can't see the footpath anymore, what you look for are cairns. That is, they are little but deliberate piles of stones like this. There. And these piles of stones usually show you the way. That's what they're there for. They're there to show you the way. So let's just put a little arrow there. That's a cairn. And actually he's remembering this this pilot while he's flying to his death. He's remembering how he and his brothers were building cairns. There's a rubbishy picture of the pilot as a kid building cairns, and actually he's with his brothers, so they too are somewhere nearby and they are building cairns as well. So there's a brother building a cairn, and what they're doing is building them to see who's withstood the longest a turbulent inrush of breakers. Breakers are waves, yeah? So we've got the sea here, and these breakers, the waves, are hopefully going to bring their father's boat safe. So their father, that is the daughter's grandfather. So let's just do a little picture of his boat coming in. There's his boat coming in safe, lots of fish probably, all stacked in the back. And this is what he's remembering. And let's just be clear about cairns. Cairns are small but deliberate piles of stones to show the way. And actually to show the way along a path that's hard to follow. So, you know, this is a hard path to follow, I think. This pilot flying to his death is a hard path to follow. And significantly, he's remembering how the cairns that they built for the grandfather's craft coming home to shore safely is one of the enduring memories as he's flying. Yet another thing to help encourage him to turn around and bring in their father's boat safe. A boat is another craft, and this one returns safely. So moving up to the next stanza, we're not far from finished really. Yes, grandfather's boat safe. This is in italics, you'll have noticed, and we change from third person to first person here. Let's just make sure that we write that down. So first person voice here. And this reminds readers of how the narrative is being related to children, of course. Maybe they've interrupted the speaker, but also I think, and significantly, that their focus is on the grandfather, not on the pilot. And you know, the whole poem so far has been about the pilot, and they're picking up on, yeah, but you mean your grandfather's boat. Remember, the grandfather refers to the daughter's grandfather. If you read the poem, it's hard to interpret it any other way. So yes, they must mean your grandfather, speaking to the woman. So first person voice. Let's get some of this down. Reminding readers how this narrative So it reminds readers of how this narrative is being related to children. And there's an implication. It implies that they have interrupted the story. And I think the significant point, significantly, their focus is not on the pilot, that is the person who the poem is about so far, but instead on fisherman, the pilot's father. And so here you've got the pilot's voice is conspicuously absent, that it's silenced by shame and dishonour, really. And there's this repetition of safe here as well, which reinforces the pilot's ideas, I think, of self-preservation. And then, where does the grandfather's boat go? It goes to the shore, salt sodden, awash, with cloud-marked mackerel, black crabs, feathery prawns, the loose silver of whitebait, and once a tuna, the dark prince, muscular and dangerous. This is all very beautiful, vibrant and colourful. And so I think we could just perhaps bracket this. That really, again, we've got another reason to turn around. I think beauty and abundance. Now this is the catch that's in the boat, the beauty and abundance of nature and the catch of fish becomes powerful and persuasive force to stay alive. So here you have a pilot who has gone, he's embarked, he's flown, he's seen several things that make him think of alternatives to flying his ship into an American warship, and he remembers his family. This too is something that helps him reconsider, and then he's remembering the beauty of the catch, and then also a tuna. This seems important here. A tuna, the dark prince, muscular and dangerous. I think that's worth saying here. But in Japanese, the traditional word for tuna in Japanese is, I don't know this, it's also in some Hawaiian countries. In Japan it's an old-fashioned word, and it's still used in some Pacific countries, but it is shibi, which in Japanese, as it turns out, is a pun. And so those words that could mean one thing or the other. And shibi not only meant tuna, it also means the day of death. So let's write that, which is a pun for day of death. And so this is significant for the pilot's fate, whether or not he fulfills his mission or not, because it is his day of death. Deciding to turn around and thinking that he was going to live still turns out to be his day of death. So significant because whether the pilot's mission succeeds or not, he does die. Either way, at the end, he wonders which would be the better way to die. So we know that that his last memory before he turned around, before he finally decided to, is of something that in Japanese was a pun for the day of death. And so he turns around, and then actually, ironically, got back, and that too was his day of death. But also, I think we should look at this full stop here, because that is the first full stop. I'm crossing my arrows a little bit here, but never mind. Let's just put an arrow down there. That this is a 5-stanza long sentence, and this is the first full stop of the poem. First full stop, and we've got a 5 stanza long sentence represents the relentlessness of his flight, and the full stop represents his landing, because he did come back. This is the last part of his flight, this full stop here, and then we have the italicization again, and we have the first person voice again, and we can read this. And though he came back, my mother never spoke again in his presence, nor did she meet his eyes. And the neighbours too, they treated him as though he no longer existed. Only we children still chattered and laughed, till gradually we too learned to be silent, to live as though he had never returned, that this was no longer the father we loved. So all of this italicized, and obviously this man has suffered the shame and disgrace and dishonour. Let's write this down. I think the disgrace, the shame, the dishonour of returning, because he fails his mission. He does fail it, and I think we need to talk about the first person narration. The first person narration here, it does emphasize the pilot's remoteness in a way. Remote from this first person speaker, but also there's no kind of negative judgment of his dishonour or his failure, not really. However, there is no negative judgment of his failure, and I put failure in speech marks there. And sometimes, she said, he must have wondered which had been the better way to die. And it's interesting that comparative adjective there, because really it does highlight the irony that the pilot still had a kind of death of sorts. This comparative adjective, better, highlights the irony that the pilot still had. That the pilot, I'll put in brackets actually, hoping to save himself, still had a death. Still had a death of sorts. That is because he lost everything he lived for, which actually is tragic and terrible. And so that brings us to the end. We haven't really touched very much on